God says, treat the foreigner as your native born. So that's incorporated into Israel's Declaration of Independence. Did the Palestinians leave Israel? Well, yeah, but not because Israel kicked them out, but because the Arab government said, get out.
Israel declared statehood in 1948, and according to most people's understanding of history, Israel kicked the Palestinians out.
So if we look at Israel's Declaration of Independence, we appeal to the Arab inhabitants of this country to get out? No, to participate with us in building up the state of Israel on the basis of, listen to this, you'll be secondary citizens, you'll be zimmi, which is a Muslim term for those who are not regarded as equal. No, you will have full and equal citizenship and due representation with Israel in all of its provisional and permanent institutions. So right there in 1948, when Israel became a state, Israel made sure they thought it was important enough to put in their Declaration of Independence to let the world know we want the Arabs to stay. You're equal among us. Why would they say that? Well, they say that because it's in Scripture. We know that in Leviticus 19:34, God says, treat the foreigner as your native born. So that's incorporated into Israel's Declaration of Independence.
So let me also clarify something else. This is not an invading army of Jews, but Israel was established with the approval of the UN.
Yes.
And so they declared their statehood and declared that Arabs would have equal partnership in building this new state, but that's not what happened.
Right.
The Arabs left. Many of the Arabs left. Why?
The false claim is the Jews kicked them out of Israel. Were the Arabs, though, kicked out of Israel? Yes, but Israel didn't do it. Who did it? And here's the backstory that folks don't know. When Israel became a state in 1948, the following day, 5 Arab nations and another 2 by proxy declared war against her because they believed that that land belonged to the world of Islam. And so you hear that cheer, that rallying cry, and it's not new. When you hear supposed pro-Palestinian protesters say, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, this is 70, 80 years old we've been hearing this.
Right.
And so at this particular point, here's what happened. Arab radio broadcasters got on the radio and broadcast a message in Arabic to these Arabs who were living in Israel at the time. And they basically said, look, tomorrow we are going to liberate Palestine. They didn't even refer to it as Israel. They referred to it as Palestine, which we'll get to. But we can't do it alone. So those of you Arabs who are living there, here's what we need you to do. Tomorrow we need you to leave your homes, run to the borders and fight with us. And then after we win, you will go in back to your home. You'll also inherit the home of your Israeli neighbor, and we'll have what we believe land that was originally ours, Palestine.
Yeah, give a couple of examples. You actually have at least one example I know of the Prime Minister of Syria making this plea to the Arabs living in Israel proper in 1948.
Thank you, Jonathan. And I think that's so important because did the Palestinians leave Israel? Well, yeah, but not because Israel kicked them out, but because the Arab government said, get out. And the prime minister at the time, his name was Khaled al-Azam. He was the prime minister of Syria, and he set the record straight. So many of the false claims that we're hearing now, Jonathan, have been answered decades ago. Here's what he said. He said, the Arab governments, not Israel, the Arab governments told the inhabitants of Palestine to evacuate it and leave for the bordering Arab countries. We, again, not Israel, we brought destruction, the Arab governments did, upon 1 million Arab refugees by calling on them and pleading with them to leave the land. So they've admitted that they were the ones responsible, and yet where does the blame lie today? On Israel.
Yeah. Now, you made a comment that I want you to expound on. You said there were no Palestinians.
Right.
In 1948.
Yeah.
There were no Palestinians. Unpack that, because that goes against the world perception of Israel today and the Palestinian conflict.
You bet.
There were Palestinians, but you're saying no, there were no Palestinians.
There were no Palestinians. And in fact, let's go back farther than 1948. Let's go back, say, to the year 132, AD 132. Now, we know that this time and prior to this time, Israel was under Roman control and authority. You read the Bible during the time of Yeshua, you read names like Gallo, obviously Pontius Pilate, so Roman authority. At this point in the year 132, there had been so many rebellions by the Israelites against the Roman government, basically saying we've had enough. And a lot of it had to do with higher and higher taxes that the Roman government kept on imposing. We're looking at the traditional Jewish community that finds this man, charismatic man, who in Hebrew, his name is Shimon bar Kochba, or in English, Simon the son of a star. And they get really excited because there's a messianic prophecy in Numbers 24:17, where Moses says, I see him, but not now. He's far off. A star will come out of Jacob. So we know that it's referring to the Messiah. It's a reference to a star. Here's a guy whose name is son of a star. You're it. You're the Messiah. So they send him into battle against Rome. And this time our team loses.
Yeah, it's a disaster.
It is. And at this point, Rome basically says, they say, you know what we're going to do to you Jews? Obviously, raising the taxes was not enough. We're going to punish you in a much more deeper way. What we're going to do is we're going to change the name of where you live. It's not going to be called Israel anymore. We're going to give it a new name. We're going to give it the name Palestina. Why? Because there were Philistines around? No, but because the term Palestina was not a reference to Palestinians. It was a reference to the arch enemies prior of Israel, the Philistines. What greater insult against the Jews than to name their land after the worst enemies they had had in history up to that point? That's where the term Palestine comes from today. It had nothing to do with the Palestinians.
It's a direct slam against the owners of the land, the occupiers, which was Rome.
Right.
Renamed it as punishment against the Jews.
Exactly. And we know that it had nothing to do with the Palestinians. God says in his word that he made the Philistines extinct. So, newsflash, you can't have descendants from an extinct group of people.
And the name stuck through the British occupation of Israel.
It did.
And interesting, I've seen passports from post-1948.
Yeah.
The Jews of Israel were called Palestinians.
They were, and the Arabs at the same time rejected. Don't you dare call me a Palestinian. That refers to the Jews. Right. In fact, the day, and it's somewhat ironic that the day that Israel became a state, it was front page news on a newspaper that at that time was called the Palestine Post.
Right. In Jaffa, in the port of Jaffa, right? You can go today into these old art stores and museums, and there's these steamship posters, Visit Palestine.
Yeah.
And they're posters to attract the European Jewish community pre-World War II to come visit the Holy Land.
Here's the fact, though, the truth. From a biblical perspective, there's no such thing as Palestine.
No.
Or Palestinians.
No. It's
fabricated. That's so important. I know this is hard for some of you. This is just mind-blowing. But biblically, there is no such thing as Palestine or the Palestinians.
And you know what's amazing? You know who actually says that the loudest, that there's no Palestine and no Palestinians? The Palestinians do. It's just that people don't go back in history. It's 1977. And a gentleman by the name of Zahir Hussein was a member of the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization. The reason that you've got today groups with names like, my gosh, I mean, Fatah, the Houthis, Muslim Brotherhood, Hezbollah, Hamas, and everybody else is basically the Palestine Liberation gave rise to it. So Zahir Hussein, who is a high-up committee member with the Palestine Liberation Organization and identifies himself as a Palestinian, sits down for a newspaper interview with a Dutch newspaper called Trouw. In English, it means the Sentinel. The newspaper reporter was so savvy, he said, okay, Mr. Hussein, I need to ask you something. You folks say that you're Palestinians, you are the original inhabitants of the land, you come from days of old. He said, but if that's the case, how come most people never heard the term Palestinian until like 1966? It's a great question. And to his credit, Zahir Hussein gave an honest answer. And the reason I'm so excited to get this across is because, let's face it, it would be easy for people watching this program who are confused, who are taking the pro-Palestinian side to say, well, of course, this is a Jewish program. They're going to give their side. They're going to give Israel's side. So everything is going to be slanted. I don't want to do that. I'm going to give you the opponent's Zahir Hussein, Palestinian, says the Palestinian people does not exist. He says, the rest of it, the creation of a Palestinian state is only a means for continuing our struggle against Israel for Arab unity. Only for political and tactical reasons do we speak today about the existence of a Palestinian people. Arab national interests demand that we propose the existence of a distinct Palestinian people. Why? So that we can have an identity? No, to oppose Zionism. Let's say, for the sake of saying, somebody says, okay, fine, Jewish Voice, you got one guy. Okay, so what if there's a lot more than one guy? The year was 1937. The politician's name was Aouni Bey Abdul Hadi, an Arab politician. Here's what he said. He said, there's no such country as Palestine. So this is almost 100 years ago. And then he said, Palestine is a term the Jews invented. This is how crazy this is. Here's another source. An Arab historian, Philip Hitti, from 1947 said, there is no such thing as Palestine. Third quote, this one is my favorite. The guy's name was Ahmed Shukiri. He was the first chairman of the Palestine Liberation Organization, the PLO. He said in 1956, Palestine is nothing but southern Syria. And you know, when you hear that, it's like, oh my gosh, would somebody please tell that to Hamas so that they'll know they've been attacking the wrong country for the past 10 months?
Or you could say Western Jordan, too,
exactly.
right?
The founders and leaders made it very clear, we're not for a land and we're not for a people. We're against a people in a land, namely the Jews in the state of Israel. This is their whole reason for existence.
People don't realize that they're out there pleading a cause that doesn't exist.
Hi, my name is Ezra Benjamin, and I'm the Vice President of Global Ministry Affairs here at Jewish Voice. I'm glad you visited our site today, and before you close this video, I just want to say thanks. Thanks for coming to learn more about what we do. However you got here today, an ad, a search, maybe even a prompting from the Lord, thanks for responding.